Welcome, Rabbi Ron Li Paz, a wonderful graduate alumni of AGRCA and is doing amazing work in the world. Has even met with the Pope recently and offered a blessing to the Pope. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. So I'd love to hear about that and all that you're doing. Firstly, why don't you begin by telling us what it was like for you to be a student at AGRCA and what that gave to you to build your career?
It was a perfect landing for me because I think maybe I'm a typical AJR candidate, or was, in that I already had a full life. And the idea of leaving my life, creating a complete pause and exiting everything that kept me busy, including family life and, parnasa, everything I was doing, to stop and immerse myself in a university experience of seminary wasn't a fit for me. Mm-hmm. And why AJR was, and what it gave to me, was an ability to continue to be a father and a husband, which was critical to my identity and my life purpose, and to lead a congregation, which I was already doing as a cantorial soloist, chazan. So I came to AJR knowing I needed a fit, and the fit had to be right, meaning it not only had to academically fit my needs, socially, experientially, culturally fit, but also I had to be able to maintain what was sometimes tenuous, but a balance in my life. And the school for me, I think one of the things that I valued the most was the quality of the learning, the quality of the chavruta study, not just the instructors who were strong, but also the collegiality, the conversation and learning that I had with colleagues. I think that was rich. I actually really appreciated, one of the things that I appreciated enormously was the breadth of life experience that AJR students then brought to the learning experience. Mm-hmm. So I know what it was like to go as a young person, 18, 19, 20. For me, high school, I then went to the Air Force, and after the Air Force to studies. It's one thing to go as a young adult, I'll say, into deep learning, but a very different, especially in this line of work, different experience coming to learning when you and most of the people around you have already experienced a lot of life and depth in life experiences that clearly are critical to this.
So you were already functioning as a cantor at Valley Outreach, then you became rabbi, and you've accomplished quite a bit there. You've grown the synagogue. What is unique about your synagogue, and what are your goals in building the synagogue?
When I came to the synagogue, we were small, as most synagogues were at some point. And I think we were doing a little well. And I think one of the things I learned from that was do a little well, whatever scale that is, but do a little well. So I've learned a lot about that. Rather than trying to be all things to everybody, let's do, for instance, when my wife and I started a school at our synagogue, which is called JEWELS, which stands for Jewish Education, Wisdom, Ethics, and Literacy and Service. We said, let's start it with 4th through 7th grade only. And people said, why would you start a school to be as narrow as that? And I said, I want to do a little very well and get a reputation for that. Then we'll expand in both directions, which we did. The synagogue has been a good fit for me. I came in very part-time, just as a singer, really. I'll say a singer fluent in the Hebrew rather than a learned community leader. I learned as I went along from my dad, a chazan, and other people along the way. The community, what's unique about it, I think I'll say qualitatively, it's not something you can necessarily see on paper. It's got a sweetness to the community. I've renewed and renewed and renewed my contracts here, I think for that reason more than anything else. Every time I do a little cheshbon, a little inventory with myself, and I ask myself, what am I looking for in the next period of my professional life? And what do I value here? And why might I leave if I would? And every time I come back to the goodness and sweetness and health of the community. And I've always said, as long as it's healthy, and it, thank God, has been, and it's attracting, something about what we're doing is attracting wonderful people and their support, then I'll happily be honored to stay here.
So you've also been involved in interfaith work and traveling around the world. And tell me a little
Right.
bit about what it was like to meet the Pope, and what did you learn and what did you give to the Pope and your encounter with him?
I went with a bishop. I was in Azerbaijan for a UN conference, and there were 10 of us from the US who were sent there. So there it was, being in a country that's 96% Muslim, being one of a few Jews. There are 20,000 Jews in the country. So with me, it was 22, another rabbi and myself, or 20,002. And I went from that intercultural experience of being a minority in a Muslim country and seeing how I was respected and cared for there. Then the bishop, Juan Carlos Mendes, and I, whom I've had as a guest in the synagogue a number of times, and collaborated with him a number of times, he said, "I'd like you to meet the Holy Father. Will you come with me to Rome?" So I clearly said yes, I'd go on that opportunity. I didn't know, I have to say, when my wife asked, "Do you think this is happening?" I said, "I don't know." I said, I don't, I usually have high expectations. I had very low expectations. I had a meeting in the Vatican that was fascinating the day before. And just to be in the Vatican rather than to be in the Vatican Museum was a privilege. And the bishop and a priest representing the Vatican and representing a part of the Vatican that's invested in unity in the church. And I think that's an interesting thought for all of us, not just Catholics, but the church as a whole. So to all denominations. The three of us sat in an ancient room on three beautiful ancient chairs and had a conversation about the roles of our religions, respectively, in the world today and what the challenges are. And at the end of it, he handed me an invitation for an audience with Pope Francis that was personalized to me and one to the bishop. But again, I thought, it's an audience. I've been in audiences, and that can be 10,000 people. To see that next morning that there were thousands of people on St. Peter's Square. And we were ushered to the front, and then the front of the front, to where there were three red chairs assigned to special guests of the Pope. And I had the middle of those three seats. It was awe-inspiring. I don't know what else to say. Felt like a child. I kept thinking, is this really happening in my life? And then to be invited then to meet Pope Francis and to share a few words with him, which I did, words of gratitude for his role in creating unity in our world. And I spoke specifically about anti-Semitism in the world today. And I know what he's invested in terms of opening the Vatican archives next year to the Vatican's role in the Holocaust. I think this is a courageous Pope, aside from anything else, and I wanted to give him my support. There was a moment in our meeting when I asked him, "May I bless you, Your Holiness, with the Hebrew prayer from the Book of Numbers, from our Torah?" And he held my arms and pulled in close to me and lowered his head and closed his eyes. And I said the blessing, Yivarechecha, the benediction, and translated it and thanked him. And one of the things, I feel like I had the small experience, which was this extraordinary intimacy with this man, this leader of 1 billion people on the planet. And then what I realized afterwards as I walked away was there were giant screens on both sides so that 10,000 or whatever number of people in St. Peter's could see that. And I thought, how many people might have been changed in their perceptions by just the visual, just seeing the Pope, two men with different colored yarmulkes, essentially, two religious leaders. And what preconceptions do we people in the world, particularly in Europe today, have of Jews and of Catholics and of Christians and Jews? And what might a single moment do for somebody's conversation with themselves and with theirself and with families and communities? So that was awesome in itself. What was additionally powerful was seeing a few 100,000 people have seen that image now via the internet and via social media. And I see responses in all different languages from different places in the world. And I'm inspired by the thought that maybe or seeing that as a symbol of goodness and of hope and maybe of a different way of approaching one another.
It was what we call a Kiddush Hashem, the sanctification of God's name, and an affirmation of the unity of all religions primarily. We're all in the world to create love and justice and peace despite all the acrimony and extremism that gets mixed in. But you got back to the pure roots of it.
Right.
And as you say, Pope Francis is a courageous and humble leader and doing extraordinary things. And I'm glad you got to speak about anti-Semitism and the importance of standing up against that. You also mentioned before that before you reached the Rome, you were with your colleague who and met Muslims who also venerated you as a religious leader. I find the same experience in Los Angeles. I'm involved with a lot of Jewish Muslim dialogue. I go to iftar as I speak, and they're highly respectful toward a rabbi. They perceive us as a co-religionist who worship God, and they have great respect for that. If more people would experience that, they'd have a different perception of a stereotype of some of the Muslim community. So I think that's very important to continue to do that work, and I'm glad you're doing that.
Can I just add, Mel, something, Rabbi, that inspires me through all this work is proximity. How little we can care for one another when we're not close to one another. Just being human. When we're too far from one another, we just become blurry images and stereotypes of a people, a family, and religion, a race. And I feel like what I've realized through iftars this year, particularly through conversations with people of different religions, is when we can see the color of each other's eyes, we're close enough. We see a real human being and their vulnerabilities and our shared stories.
I totally agree with you. That it's my passion and commitment to do the same. We have to create intimacy through knowing the other. And we see we're all created in the image of God. We listen to each other's pain and we join hands. And it's much more powerful when we join with the other religions and have the voice of love in the world than just retaining our own communities and the fences around them. And it's a symptom of a lack of faith and trust and love when we have to coalesce in that way. So I'm very glad you're doing that work. And at AJRCA, we try to preach that and model that for our community. Our activities to accept difference, even within the denominations, as we started the school that way, and to do outreach to those who are not affiliated, but also to spread that with all the religions. So we've had some meetings with others, and we go out into the world with iftars and Jewish Catholic dialogue, etc. So we did something with Kristallnacht with Loyola Marymount this past year as well, and it was very well attended and a lot of love spread around. So we have to continue to do that. So I wanted to especially speak to you about that because I saw you also on the Facebook with Pope Francis, and it was very moving to me as well. And I was very proud of you as a graduate for doing that kind of work. I hope you continue it, and I hope you continue to connect to us and continue to learn from us. We're offering now new community courses, very inexpensive and free for alumni that you would, I think, enjoy. And we'd love to continue to learn from you and how you've built a wonderful community, combined your talent of voice and mind and heart. And I know your wife works with you as well, and she's very talented as well. And Jennifer as well, another graduate of our school as a chaplain, works with you at your synagogue.
And I think we might be the only synagogue that I know of, maybe on the planet, maybe in the country, that employs a chaplain. Not a hospital, not a hospice center, not many places where chaplains are typically seen, but she's the chaplain to our community, and it's an incredible gift to us.
It is. And, that's one of the uniquenesses of our school, too. We not only have a rabbinical school, but a chaplaincy school and a cantorial school, the only one on the West Coast. So there's great need for chaplains, and it's so wonderful to expand the role, not only in nursing homes, hospitals, prisons, et cetera, but in synagogues themselves. People need counseling and support and nurturing. So it's a wonderful combination. So I wish you a lot of continued success, and I hope we get to connect more over the year and perhaps do things together with the interfaith activities. There's so many of them in the city. that I'm involved with, I'm sure you're too. It shows how it's spread out because we're both doing the same work and not always meeting at these meetings, because there's so many meetings. I think one of the things I always speak about, it would be nice if we could unify, rather than having all the disparate groups, but a larger voice as a unified voice that can communicate to the other groups. So anyway, I'm just cutting this short only because I want people to really see this and really hone in on this. And they say that they can only retain attention for 10 minutes on Facebook or the internet. So we're going to end this meeting now, but this is just the beginning for our continued dialogue. And I hope all our alumni and students see this video and see the great work they've been doing. And we say, Amen. Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Imagine saying that to the Pope, and it's so nice that he leaned into you, and that's the vision I have of him too, as a humble, courageous soul. So thank you very much, Ron, for being a messenger from our community to him. Shalom, shalom. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.